Did you know that our decisions and emotions can be influenced simply by the way that information is presented to us? This is known as the framing effect, and if you want to figure out how that works, then this is the video for you. The framing effect explains how we can present the same information in different ways and evoke a different emotional response. This can drastically impact our decision-making ability, and sometimes this framing is done consciously and sometimes it's not. So if you want to be an independent thinker, have more control over your decisions and be able to influence other people, then the framing effect is a critical mental model to learn. So just like a frame around a painting, a frame can draw attention to something. So for example, in this frame right here, I'm being framed by these two lights. They are different lights in the background, it's slightly blurrier there, there's light on my face and it's drawing attention to me. So framing effectively helps you draw attention to something that you want your audience to be able to see. Framing is not about what you present, it's more about how you present it. So using the example of this video, there's a different light in the background. Now if I put on a green light, maybe that would accentuate the color in my eyes. If I turn this light to red, it may bring out the red patches in my skin. Depending on how you frame an image or a piece of information is really going to control on how it's actually being perceived. But before we go into any more examples, if there is just one thing in this video that you do like, please do hit the like button. It really does help this channel. With that being said, let's go on to the video. One way we can use framing is through association. So if we take the text, "I'll be waiting for you," that can have many different meanings depending on the situation. One of these fonts gives the impression that it's a murderer waiting to kill you, where the other one looks like it's more like something they'd write in a card. "I can't wait to have you home. I'm going to be waiting for you," in a nice context. It's exactly the same piece of information, but the framing is different through association. You associate this type of font with something negative and the other type of font with something positive. Comparative frames are also a powerful one too. Let's take these two circles. Depending on what information you surround this circle with, it can give the impression that it's either larger or smaller. Both of these circles are actually exactly the same size, but the information that surrounds it can determine what kind of frame or interpretation is taken from this image. Taking the lessons learned from visual framing can be a really powerful base to help us interpret certain information, but there are many other types of techniques to frame information that can impact someone's decisions. So let's take a look at some of those. Frame inversion. Frame inversion shifts the perspective on a piece of information simply by flipping it on its head. If we take the example of the yogurt pot, we may describe this as 20% fat or 80% fat-free. Now, it's exactly the same piece of information. 20% fat means 80% fat-free and vice versa. Most of the time, these yogurt brands will focus on 80% fat-free. The reason they do this is because they want our attention to be drawn to the absence of fat rather than the presence of it. Another powerful way to use the framing effect is to reframe the reference point. A great example of this is to look at Starbucks coffee. Starbucks, let's say, costs $5 a coffee. If you were to compare that to, say, 10 cents a coffee for making it at home, that seems ridiculously expensive. However, if you were to change the reference point and actually compare a $5 Starbucks to renting out an office space that gives you a free coffee for $100 a day in a WeWork, well, that $5 for a coffee actually in Starbucks, when you're comparing it to a WeWork space and an office for the day, suddenly becomes ridiculously cheap. Simply by switching the reference point can really help change the perception of something. Another famous example that we could use here is to look at Coca-Cola and Red Bull. Coca-Cola is obviously one of the biggest brands in the entire world and most successful soft drinks. Red Bull has also seen a ton of success, but when they first started out and Red Bull was being imported into the West from Thailand, they first hired a research agency to basically see how good is this drink. This research agency actually reported that from all of their studies, it was the worst performing drink they've ever researched. The taste was disgusting, it had a bad side effect, it made people feel jittery. If you took that information and compared it to a soft drink, why would anyone want to drink something that tastes so disgusting? Now, if you use this reframing effect, we might actually reframe Red Bull from a soft drink to a functional drink. When you make that switch, and Red Bull now becomes a caffeinated drink that gives you wings, that is now associated with extreme sports and enhanced performance, well, the smaller can is now a sign of potency. The odd taste is a bit like when you drink some funky medicine that's going to have some sort of side effect. So again, switching that frame from a soft drink to a functional drink can be a really powerful way to influence the perception. Once you learn some of the techniques in order to be able to reframe information, what sort of things you should focus on is obviously the next important step. One key thing which is discussed in the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who was actually a psychologist and earned a Nobel Prize in economics, is this concept of loss versus gain. Human beings are really focused on loss aversion. That means we don't like losing. We're going to try and maximize gains and run away from losses as much as possible. So one of the findings that Daniel Kahneman spoke about is the fact that a loss is perceived as much more significant than its equal in gain. So if you lose $50, it's seen as a much more negative thing than if you were to gain $50. Another key finding Daniel Kahneman had was that a surefire gain is going to be much preferred to a probable one, and a probable loss is going to be much more preferred to a surefire loss. So a key takeaway from this is if you present information, an option that you want someone to not choose, it's much more powerful to reframe that option as a guaranteed loss. One example that Daniel Kahneman talks about in his book is vaccination. Imagine that there were 600 people in the United States that were affected by an outbreak of a virus. There's two options. In one scenario, we're going to focus on the gain, and in the second scenario, we're going to focus on the loss. So in the first scenario, they are either given the vaccine and there's a guaranteed surefire win that 200 people's lives will be saved. Or there's an option B, which is there is a 1/3 possibility that everybody's life will be saved. Which option would be the most popular? Well, in this scenario, where the frame is on a gain, i.e. on saving lives, most people chose option A because it was a surefire gain. However, if we flip this around and focus on the loss, option A is going to guarantee that 400 people die, whereas option B is going to have a 2/3 chance that everybody dies, which naturally means that there is a 1/3 chance that everybody could survive. Now, in that option, when it's reframed as a loss, most people would choose option B because they're trying to maximize the probability that more people could be saved. Or in other words, they're trying to avoid absolute loss. And that's why they don't choose option A, which is 400 people are guaranteed to die. So the key learning here is if you want someone to not choose an option, then you should frame it as a loss. If you take this same example into the sales environment, a lot of people when pitching a product or service will really try and focus on the guaranteed surefire wins that someone's going to get from using your product or service. One of the reasons why this doesn't work is because people don't believe you when you say that they're going to have a certain result. For them, it's not actually a guaranteed win, it's a probable win. So the better way to reframe that would be to focus on the status quo being a surefire loss. So those are the top techniques in how to frame and what to focus on, but here's a bonus one. If you wanted to get a different answer, you need to focus on asking a different question. I recently read this article about a barista in Starbucks and how she completely changed her sales in the shop. Normally when you go to Starbucks and you ask for your coffee at the end and you go to pay, they'll ask you, is that everything that you wanted today? Your automatic answer is to say yes, because you just think they're trying to sell me something. You think, yes, that's all I wanted today. Thanks very much. Let's move on. Let's pay and let's go. However, one time this barista reframed the question at the end when they were at a checkout and said, what else sounds delicious to you today? Now, this question is completely different because you're reframing it rather than focusing on an automatic association with loss. That question answering it is not committing to buying something. It's not committing to a loss of money because you've been caught into a transaction that you didn't want to enter into. You're just simply saying, well, I guess the lemon cake looks really nice. And the next thing you know, the lemon cake's in the basket and you pay for something that you weren't originally going to have simply because you reframed the question. Thanks very much, everyone. If you like just one thing in this video, please do hit the like button. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to see more videos just like this, then hit the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the bell icon next to it. Thanks a lot for your time. Bye-bye.